Thank you very much, Mauji. Of course, all that we see around us and we do would not have been possible in the digital world without data. And as more and more things get digitized, the quantum of data that gets generated increases, and it increases exponentially. So mountains of data, in fact, not only mountains, Himalayan mountains of data is what, which is really happening. And the way it is growing is truly mind-boggling. So we start this panel discussion with the very basics. We have with us a very distinguished panel. Two people from the hardcore tech side, one from IBM, one from Hitachi, and then two people from the user side, one from Bajaj Allianz and the other from HDFC Life. So I'll start first with the basic requirement. How do we gather the data? There are myriad sources today. So how do we get it all into one place, get it sanitized, and make it usable? And I invite first to this question I pose first to Swapnil, and then I'll pose this question to Sanjay. So Swapnil, your thoughts.
Hi, very good morning to all of you. Thank you for that question. Now, we have seen the growth of the data has been tremendous, as Sir just said. Now, how there are myriad sources nowadays, right? The data earlier used to be in a single form. It used to be a block data. Nowadays, we have multiple forms of data. It's a raw, unstructured data, and the channels for that data is growing too, right? So, how do we manage that? How do we, collect that data, and how do we make it usable? One of the use cases that we see that the customers frequently use is to use, some kind of object store or multiple, storages. What we can do is we can get raw data from channels. It could be in Excel form, it could be in PDF form, it could be videos, it could be other things. But to make it usable, right, we have to curate the data, we have to process the data, and that is where the AI part, or to make it in some kind of intelligence, is where the data comes into picture. Now, we can use multiple, methods to do that. The first and the foremost thing that we can do is to use a typical AI lifecycle, wherein we have raw data that is getting ingested. That could be in any of the storage forms. Then we have some curation of data, wherein we would require kind of a parallel file system or a distributed file system, which we could use for storing the data. Then we could do the actual inferencing, wherein we would require some in-memory kind of a store, wherein we would process the data faster and we could feed it to GPU. And the final part would be to actually give the data as an output. So those are, the typical life cycle that we see in the data and the lowest form, right?
Right.
Thank you, Swapnil. I think you covered the good technical part, and I'll probably try to cover some functional part of it. How this data gathering has changed in the last few years with AI digital coming into the picture. Initially, we used to call it as data gathering, just simply picking up the data and storing at some place. After that, it started being called as onboarding. And onboarding was, you have to, do multiple things, map sources, identify sources, get the data onboarded in a way that it's ready for use. And then today, the businesses are expecting the data onboarding or other onboarding definition to be very different. When a CIO or a CTO says that data is onboarded, that means the business is ready to use the data, be it for a customer satisfaction, business transaction, or AI analysis. So data gathering has traveled all the way from just simple gathering to a complete onboarding. After that, data is ready for use. Now, there are a few milestones in between. When you do the gathering of the data, traditional gathering was limited to business transactions, and you were gathering the data from just few sources within your organization. Like data warehouse is one example where 4 or 5 participating data sources would come into the picture. But with digital AI and social media, external data sources coming in, you have to onboard many times hundreds of data sources and tons or terabytes and petabytes of data coming in. One of the challenges that enterprises are facing in the digital era is how do we onboard and map the sources first, where the data has to be picked up from. And there are certain technologies which are available today to speed up the data onboarding, known as metadata injection based repetitive data extraction from hundreds of sources, which will reduce the data gathering from months to days. So that's one technology innovation that has happened. After the data is picked up and gathered, the responsibility is to ensure that data is safe. That data is actually some kind of important transactional data or some kind of unstructured data. It needs to be safe, protected, managed, business continuity, and things like that. So you look into that aspect. Before that, you of course try to do the data transformation, data cleansing, data normalization, so that it's sort of in a better shape from a data quality perspective for the use. After that, you put together some kind of process to create some kind of structures like aggregations and all of that, which can be readily used. Today, as we speak, with the data lakes coming into the picture and all of that, enterprises are expecting that data onboarding will be considered complete. The moment data is onboarded, my AI application and business application should be able to see. Traditionally, that had not been the case because if the data gets onboarded, the data lake will not be able to see it because data that has been onboarded does not immediately reflect in data catalog. There is a delay of few hours. So real-time decision making and AI and fraud detection was sort of taking a backseat. With AI technology being used like fingerprinting, tagging, and all of that, you can have that data being reflected in data catalog then and there only. So coming back to the point, the data gathering has become data onboarding, and onboarding has been redefined in such a way that till the data becomes completely usable by business end users, it's not considered onboarded. So onboarding has become a major practice for the organization to cover all of these milestones to make sure data is ready for presentation for business use.
Thank you, Sanjay, and I really love that term, data onboarding, and making data ready to use, and all the steps you explain this in such a lucid and very simple way, for the benefit of everyone. So you have made data ready to use, but who are the users? These two gentlemen, Mr. Dipu from Bajaj, he represents Bajaj Allianz, and Mr. Bala, who represents HDFC Life. Like to listen from both of you, real practical uses that you have made of data, which has had an impact upon your business. So, Dipu, first with you.
Good morning, everyone. I think one thing which we discussed is, sharing practical examples, and not necessarily theoretical frameworks, so that the audience can gain value from the discussion. Now, we all have, heard about data, right? There are a lot of cliches going around. Data is the new oil, data is gold, right? So on and so forth. Now, firms typically face two, challenges, and both are at opposite end of the spectrum. On the one hand, we don't have enough data, which is why data is valuable. On the other hand, sometimes you get so much of data that you do not know what to do with it, right? And then people are trying to figure out various ways of ingesting it and coming out with various forms, which may or may not make business sense. So let me give you some examples of how data has helped us. I'll go back to COVID days. So we had, let's say, customers when the lockdown allowed them and they wanted to visit the branch for a particular reason, they would, let's say, go to the net and type the branch address. Now, typically in firms, what you would do, you would try to make sure that your address is updated, so that the customer does not land up in at a place where the branch was earlier present. And that's what most firms do, let's make it online. So what we did is we said, no, let's go one step further. So if a customer was trying to click on a branch, then a bot would pop up and say that, I see that you're trying to reach our branch, but can I help you, right? So that I can obviate the need for you to go to the branch. And the customer would be delighted, I have a bot popping up and telling me, that I don't need to go to the branch. And COVID, right, everything was getting serviced digitally. And then many customers would get serviced on the spot. So that was one way, by which, we use data to ensure that, customers didn't have to go to the branch. The other is I'll give you one, classic case in motor insurance, since I'm from the insurance industry. Most of you would have motor insurance, it's mandated by law. And when you have a car, right, and unfortunately, even if you crash it, normally you would call up the insurance company and say that I'm here. And the car crash can happen anywhere. You are in Mumbai, maybe you're on the highway somewhere, quite some distance away. And then you would call up the insurance company and say, I'm here and I've had an accident. The insurance company would say, okay, please wait. I know you can't go anywhere because the car is immobilized. Let me find a surveyor. Now, the surveyor may not be available at the site of the crash. They have to find somebody who is nearest. And he also has to get ready, right? He may not be ready and raring to go, right? He's not waiting for a call that, I'll go immediately. He may be doing something. Maybe he needs to get ready. Then he'll come to the site of the crash. He'll inquire about your welfare. He'll inquire about the car. He'll do his assessment, submit the report. And that car may get towed. The whole process can take time. We said, how do we, make it better for the customer? And how do we use data to come out with an experience, not only data, but tools which use data, so that we can come out with an experience which is far better for the customer. So here we said, let's try and do it with the surveyor. So what we did, we used data, tons of data, and we taught an AI engine, to do the role of the surveyor. Based on data, how can you assess the extent of damage? And then what we did, and it takes a lot of time, to teach the tool because you don't want to get it wrong. And then when, in case customers crash the car, they didn't have to call the surveyor. They just had to do two steps, take photographs of the car and upload them using the mobile app. The engine at the background will basically go through the image and in less than 20 minutes, up to certain amounts, convey the amount to the customer. And just this morning, we were discussing, the beauty of, India's payment infrastructure. The moment the customer gives a consent, using the myriad, digital tools available, the payment can be made. And then within 20 minutes, and customers couldn't believe it when we first did it because this process could take days. So that is how, we've been able to use AI, and data to make a difference. I gave you two examples. I can go on and on, but I'm cognizant of time. So we'll wait to hear from Bala.
Yeah, thanks, Dipu. Great examples. So for us, one of the things that matters is which of the data is verifiable and is sort of guaranteed sort of thing in a way that I can trust it. Now, one of the very simple example is income. Unlike a lending industry, which rely a lot on your income, insurance, I still want to make sure that the customer, because from a renewal perspective and other perspective, I want to have an idea of their income. Now, traditional ways to get your salary slips or Form 16s, or if you are self-employed, your income tax or other things. Now, often customers either don't have it ready or don't have it easily or unwillingness to share. The question is, I want a verifiable source, but rather than traditional ways, are there ways I can collect it? Now, today we give customers a host of options, whether it is account aggregator kind of a framework, whether it is I can go to bureau, understand if you have a loan. If another financial industry have given you a home loan of say 50 lakhs or 1 crore, I know what is the minimum income you have. And if it is good enough for me, I am good with that. So I can basically look at your PAN and go to bunch of external sources, which are basically verifiable sources of income or income surrogates, and serve my purpose, which is verifiable. Some of these I may require an OTP. Some of these I don't even need an OTP. You could do the same thing whether I need to verify your address. I can do CKYC, EKYC framework. You don't even need to type your address. I know your address from CKYC if you are verified. Now, these are easier examples. There are other set of examples where the data about the customer is essentially indexed to a very few IDs like your PAN card, Aadhaar card, etc. And the entire public-private infrastructures around, say, OTPs, etc., etc. Some of times it looks irritating, but it basically provides an authenticated and verifiable sources. So that becomes very powerful for us. Right?
Sure.
Great, great. In fact, both of you have given wonderful examples, real life examples, things that have happened in their organizations, and and many of these things, they take you forward by leaps and bounds. They make life so much simpler. I mean, the example that Dipu was mentioning, the car crash and then digital survey of that accident, and if everything is in order, then you get your the amount insured, or at least part of it paid also online. And just imagine the amount of customer convenience that all of this brings. And there are myriad ways, and we may not realize, as we were discussing the other day, that over the last few decades, we have really innovated a lot. I mean, just imagine when Aadhaar was first started. Who would have imagined that one day Aadhaar will become the basis of your eKYC? I mean, you will be able to do eKYC on the basis of Aadhaar. We'll go to a bank and open an account, go to a mutual fund and open an account, using Aadhaar. Now, this is the kind of uses we have brought it to, all innovative uses. Many of you might have used Digi Yatra when you would have entered into an airport. Now, how many of us would have ever thought, I mean, and at least, when Aadhaar was introduced, it was never thought that one day it will become a mechanism by which people will get entry into the airport, right? These are all innovative uses that have been made. And with AI coming in, I believe that sky will be the limit for innovations. Is just, in fact, maybe AI itself will aid us in innovating. AI itself is aid us into developing new thought processes, And so therefore, in this round, I'm going to ask this question to all of them. We're going to do a little bit of future gazing. We have the data, right? And now almost all the data is available in the digital form. How do we make use of it, How from that apple falling down, we derive that wonderful inference of gravity, the laws of gravity, Data, and then the inference or the use of it, the innovative use of it. That is what, will finally differentiate not only we as a people, but individual organizations, in this competitive world. So, like to do some future gazing, and all of them in their own ways, have had opportunities of doing this future gazing, how the organizations, their own organizations, are looking forward in the next 3 to 5 years, what's going to happen on the use of the data side, right, in their organizations. So I'll start with Sanjay, and then, we'll move in this direction.
Very, very interesting one. In fact, let's say 10, 15 years back, the enterprises were focusing on transactional data. For example, a bank will focus on, the accounts that I have, the summary, the transactions that I'm doing, and things like that. And for practical purposes, if they have to create a customer 360-degree view, it'll be like Sanjay Agarwal, what accounts, what delivery channels, and things like that will give a 360-degree view. That was 10, 15 years back, with transactional data, business data being used. Today, the reality is that data is only 10 to 20% of the enterprise data, because you have gathered a lot of digital data, unstructured data, called digital data as well, which could be around your sentiments, your interactions with bank, your reviews, your loyalty, your preferences, that are being captured in different external ecosystems that you're not even aware of. When you combine all of these together, which is from a technology perspective, structured and unstructured data, different ways of insights gathering can come out of it. For example, Customer 360 now, banks are no longer focusing on products and transactions and delivery channels. They have created data products like Customer 360 that not only talks about these things, but also includes the sentiments, the preferences, the loyalties, and creates a completely different picture of the customer. And I had my own experience. I was doing transactions, but I was not happy with the bank because of certain things. And when I wrote a mail, escalated that, the bank came back to me that we don't see any problem in transactions, but they could never analyze any of the emails that I had sent, any of the calls that I had made on IVR. So with this, the whole thing is getting changed. The way customer relationship is being maintained, the customer situations are being addressed. So what are the technologies that are driving it? One is data blending, which is data activation. When you start blending the structured business transactional data along with unstructured data that could be related to interactions, sentiments, social media feed, and all of that, it starts giving you a completely different perspective about the customer and also the way you should sell banking products and all of that. That has become one, and I'm seeing most of the industry players, banks have sort of crossed that stage. Second is adoption of AI. Adoption of AI is adding a very important layer on top of that. Gen AI especially is doing things very differently. Digi Yatra, very good example you take. Digi Yatra, if you look at what all it does behind the scene, you are being recognized, unstructured data. It goes and matches with the system, the profile that has been created. It looks at your Aadhaar card. It also looks at your boarding card. It also looks at, because I remember I landed at the wrong terminal and Digi Yatra did not allow me to enter. And then when I cross-checked it, I realized I'm at the wrong terminal. So they look at terminal information, they look at all of these, blend all of these together, and if all are ticked, it says yes and go ahead. So this is the value of the data. People are saying we have used only 10 or 20% of that today. And what they are doing, why they are not able to do it, one, they are not able to blend the data, which many banks have started doing it. Number two, if you really want to take the advantage of AI, Gen AI, your data has to be AI ready. Your traditional data that you have, petabytes of data, may contribute in a very limited way. And what are the top 3-4 things that you have to do for the data to become AI ready? Is like data labeling, annotation is one. Addressing the bias related issues that are very important. Data semantic, you have to bring in the context which is consistent across the organization. You have to focus on the prompt engineering. You have to focus on data enrichment, which you are gathering from outside, so that if certain pieces, like you have gathered customer data, but if you augment the data with age, gender, it becomes more meaningful for decision making. So those AI readiness initiatives are required. And once these are done, AI and data related technologies can do wonders for you, for your business, from a business transformation and digital transformation perspective.
Right. Thank you, Sanjay. That's very good points. Data blending, data augmentation, making data AI ready. So thank you for your inputs. And Swapnil?
Yeah. So I'll just take that conversation a bit further. That was very well enunciated. So there are two things, three things actually that are there. Just to take that conversation forward, what Sanjay said, I'll add on to that. One is the speed and the consistency of the data, right? So nowadays, we require speed in processing. So he had touched upon in his earlier, inputs that today a customer would do transactions many a times a day, right? It could be done many channels. It could be from a finance perspective. It could be an insurance. It could be an NEFT transaction. It could be an RTGS transactions, right? It could be myriad different things. Now, if a CTO, CIO, or CEO needs to have a view, that is what we are focusing on, right? We need a view for the business. How can we grow the business? That is what the end all of that data is, right? So two things that are required. One is the speed of processing that data, right? Second is to maintain that pipeline. What Sanjay had earlier said, right? Data, when it comes in today's warehouse or lakehouse kind of an environment, there's always a lag that is required for curation of data. It could be labeling, it could be sampling, right? And sometimes there is a context that is needed to be added, right? I'll give you an example. Suppose we are trying to sell an insurance policy, as we have two gentlemen who have from the insurance background, right? And we don't know that maybe just 2 hours back or one day back, he's already bought an insurance, right? So that is something amiss, right? We don't have the tap on customer. So what we are doing, or what in from a future perspective, right? What we are doing is to maintain that pipeline. We need to get that data quickly across so that there is a consistent dashboard, right? The second thing, how do we speed it up, right? From a storage perspective, storage plays a very important role in this whole AI journey, right? There is a concept called as content as storage, right? We are using NVIDIA mostly for processing or for AI kind of an inferencing. Now with this advent of content driven storage, what we can do is any change, the delta change in that particular data for a customer profile, right? It's able to track the vectors, and it is able to send the delta information to the customer, so the dashboard reflects the correct status of that particular customer or what interaction he is having from a customer perspective. Now that will be sea change, right? From giving the insights for company, right, who would be able to utilize that information and monetize it. Now that is a very critical thing. The second thing, what AI is doing, what we have done with a couple of our customers, I'd like to retell one example. Earlier, for loans or for products, we used to approach the bank, right? How are we using data? How bank is utilizing the data? Now that bank has all the data for a customer, what interactions he's doing, what are the traditional limits that he's having, and they have pre-approved products, right? In most of your bank accounts, you would get to see that. Now that is due to the data that is being gathered, cataloged, and inferenced along with the security and governance on that particular data is when the bank is enabled to give you offers without you asking, right? So all what we are doing is from adding value to the business. Now with AI and with proper usage of the data, it offers tremendous upside. So those are the two examples that I could see, right?
Right, right. Thank you, Swapnil. Real-time context-aware data is what you will need in the future, because that is what is the expectation of the uh, new generation of customers. Bala, you would be thinking in advance how you're going to tackle the things that are emerging. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So one of the things which is very critical is to reverse sort of do what is the business enablement that I'm looking for. What data, what modeling, what AI might make that process easier. So for example, take the customer onboarding. I need to do several things before I can onboard a customer. I need to have verified KYC. Of course, I can do traditional way. Give me a copy of your Aadhaar card, give me a copy of your PAN card, sign it, this, that, which doesn't work today. So I need that. I need their income proof. I need their, in a lot of cases, their medical history. I need to understand a lot of different aspects of the customer. Now, if I say, take medical. Now, in the simplest case, I will ask you, do you have diabetes? Do you have this? You say, yeah, all good, all good, all good. You look at our data, India has less than 5% people who smokes, which you know is not right. But we did what we call a declaration of good health. Now, second step is a doctor will do a telecall with you, whereby the doctor will ask you, will try to also visually assess you. Now, that visual video is also a data in some form. The third step for the more higher value policies, we will ask you to do a medical. Now, the problem here is there is a lot of subjectivity. The Take in the last case, there is a doctor or a medically educated person who looks at your report and say, while I don't have to diagnose you, but do you look healthy enough to so that I can sell you. Now that's a very subjective call. Now think of lending industry. You have a CIBIL score, which collates bunch of your data, gives a single number. If I'm not a sophisticated bank, I can just say, here is a threshold that I'm willing to take a risk. Everyone better than that, I will take it. Lower than that, I will decline it. Medical world, you don't have that. Now, an AI can take all your data, can create a medical score for you. Now, that becomes a use case. If you start from saying, this is the use case, what AI do I need? I need OCR to read your medical report if it comes to you in a non-digital fashion, which often is the case, where people will scan their medical report and send us as an image. I need to normalize the data. All the medical centers don't use the same standard data. They don't use the same font, they don't use the same format of data, etc. I need to realize and say your H1 B is different than your hemoglobin level versus your blood pressure levels and your BMIs. Everything has different parameters. A BMI of 35 for a 25-year-old is far more risky than for a 45-year-old. So I need to look at all these parameters, create a score. That's a use case. But that's not sufficient often. I have to use today a Gen AI kind of a thing where I can explain to the underwriter or to my eventual customer that I am declining you because you have very high, let's say, BMI, and at this age, high BMI coupled with even slightly higher sugar level is dangerous. Now, that's a useful use case. When you are looking at the data, from a perspective of first creating that capability, which means I have to look at historical data. But on the fly, you say as soon as the medical thing comes, historically we took a day or more for an underwriter or a medical person to go through that, give a verdict and so on. Now it happens on the fly. Now that's the power of combining the knowledge, medical person's knowledge, with the AI, with the data, and it brings customer delight. It reduces my ops cost. It increases my revenue because customer leakage reduces. It improves my profitability because I am able to weed out not so healthy customer. So it's a win-win for everybody, including the customer, company, people, cost, revenue, all sides of it. So it's important to look at the whole picture and create the use cases of data and AI in the right manner.
Right. Thank you, Bala. I mean, something very thrilling. Robotic health assessment, or maybe at least the assisted part of it. Absolutely right. I mean, it'll take away all the biases that human beings tend to have and make it that much more simpler. Yeah, sure, sure. With us, coming to the last round, right? Yeah. So, Dipu,
Yeah.
your thoughts?
So I think the challenge with going last is, a lot of the points which you want to communicate have already been covered by the, distinguished, co-panelists who spoke before me. So let me try and, answer it differently. And I'll go back to your original ask, which is, if you do crystal ball gazing, right? How do you really leverage AI, the times to come? So I'll take a broad view and I'll just mention two dimensions. Now, one is, like how Sanjay was saying, right, that he has spoken to the bank multiple times and they'll have, details of his call records and so on and so forth, but they still may end up asking him. Now, we all are aware that, we interact with various parts of the ecosystem. For example, if you go to a hotel, even if you've stayed there, sometimes they still ask you for your identity proof. You go to an airline, even if you have flown before, they will still ask you for your food preferences. So one thing is, if you take a really, fundamental view going forward, right? If we really have full data of the customer in this age of too much data, digital footprint out there, we have so much of data on apps and everything. Do we really need to have the customer carry so much of form factors, right? Do I really need to carry a passport? Do I really need to carry a credit card? Because like Digi Yatra, right? I just show my face and, read me, right? To biometrics and everything is out there, right? It just makes it easier. It can even prevent, frauds, right? For example, voters ID card. I was just reading 2 days back that in West Bengal, they found a person from Bangladesh who was a writer, who was protesting. His name is on the electoral rolls in Bangladesh, right? Sorry, in West Bengal, So you can prevent all that. The person's biometrics is authentic and then you don't need anything, right? I don't need a credit card. I don't need anything. I mean, It's an ideal world, but if that can happen, you really leverage data across the entire spectrum and you go beyond industries, you go beyond commerce itself, right? It becomes an issue even in terms of, safety and, citizenship, so on and so forth. The other is, when we talk about AI, typically we talk about, and we were just discussing this morning, that Jan Dhan accounts has been one of the unsung stories because normally what gets noticed is, what is, out there in the urban areas, right? What may happen to the masses may not necessarily get noticed. The other angle of AI is, which we can leverage, is given that we are a multilingual country, how do we ensure that, we can cater to everyone? Because typically a lot of digital assets by default, come in English. So how do we, do it, right? So to give an example, I remember reading the newspaper some time back that when, that when an Indigo flight was taking off from Hyderabad, there was a lady who could only speak Telugu, right? She couldn't speak English or Hindi. So they didn't let her sit in the emergency exit row because she couldn't speak English or Hindi. And I was just thinking, an Indian who knows her language, why should she get penalized? Now, if we really use AI, right, it's very easy to basically have a conversation where I speak in a particular language, the tool immediately translates it to the language the customer can understand, and the reverse flow happens, right? When the person speaks, then it comes to me. That way we can also ensure that we are able to cater to, all our customers, in our diverse setup without, anybody having to feel like a have-not, right? Because we can't have this digital divide, right? Or this, linguistic divide. So I think these two dimensions, I just remember, Manoj pointing out, that we need to be cognizant of time. I can go on and on. But, just going beyond what, my co-panelist said, I think if you can really take AI to this level where at the customer level, I'm just me, I don't need to have multiple form factors. It takes away a lot of inconvenience and brings in safety. And if we can make it multilingual, we can really take AI to the masses in our specific context.
Thank you, Dipu. And like mountains of data, this topic also, can go on and on because there's so much to be discussed. But we'll end here.